Hi, this is Julie with a quick note before we begin. Season 8 of the Mother's Quest podcast is here, and we're approaching our 100th episode. Whether you've been a listener for some time, or if this is your first time listening, I invite you to find Mother's Quest on Apple Podcasts, rate it, and write a review. I have a goal of reaching 100 reviews in honor of 100 episodes this season, and I would love your help to get there. These conversations are so powerful, and you can help me to spread the word by sharing what you love about them. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode number 99 with my own father-in-law, David Neale. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neale, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? Welcome to this special Father's Day episode featuring my very own father-in-law, David Neale. I started dating my husband, Chris, when I was only 19. So I realized David has been a source of inspiration and guidance in my life for over 30 years. How lucky I am to have had his example of leadership, impact, and joy for life to light my way for my entire adulthood. The inspiration for this episode was sparked several months ago at a big milestone birthday celebration David organized to honor his 80th year. That celebration was also the launch of a new fund he initiated through the San Jose Rotary, inspired by his experience as a grandparent to my two boys, Ryan, who's autistic, and Jacob, who navigates dyslexia, ADHD, and dysgraphia. Before I share a little more about this conversation, I'd like to introduce Jacob with this episode's dedication.
Hi, this is Jacob, one of the high-energy boys in the background of the music at the beginning of this episode. I am also the youngest of David Neale's grandchildren, and I am proud to be here to dedicate this episode of Mother's Quest podcast to my papa. In this interview, you'll hear my grandfather share stories about his life, about his own mother and father, and the ways they impacted his humble beginnings, and about his successful life achievements. You'll also hear about a new fund he created to support neurodivergent youth like me and my brother through the San Jose Rotary, where he has been a member for many years. I feel honored about him doing this, and I hope you'll consider learning more and getting involved to support his effort. Thank you, Papa, for the example you showcased to me and all your grandchildren. You are kind and amazing in each and every way. Everyone adores you.
Thank you, Jacob, for your beautiful dedication. As you shared, this episode covers stories and wisdom of your papa's life, including his childhood in England, his move to Montreal, and then San Jose, California, his impactful work as the founder and CEO of the Court Companies, and all the thoughtful ways he shows up as a grandfather. One of David's most significant contributions in leadership has come through his innovative thinking and outside-the-box solutions for redevelopment housing, including the creation of Art Arc, an artist housing initiative, which he talks a lot about in this episode, veterans and teacher housing, and most recently, the Agrihood, an affordable housing project with retail and an urban farm at the center. As David says, his success did not happen in a straight line. His life journey was filled with plot twists, pivots, and even a few failures. But through it all, with my mother-in-law Anne by his side, he continued to believe in himself and his dreams. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did and leave inspired as I am to keep persevering through challenges, opening ourselves to new perspectives and out-of-the-box thinking, and knowing that each setback may bring us closer to all we've ever wanted. I'm Julie Neale, and this is Mother's Quest. David, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. It's an honor to have you here. I've been thinking about having you on the podcast for a number of years now, but this particular year felt right after a big milestone birthday of yours and a collaborative project that you and I are working on that I'm hoping we'll delve into. So thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, Julie. I'm honored to have been asked, and I'm honored finally to be able to make the connection with you. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
So we're going to start with a question I ask all of my guests. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and the impact that your own mother had in shaping who you are today.
Well, my story goes back quite a long time, as you know. I was born in 1943 in England, which is just before the end of the war. So my mother and father were working family. We grew up in a small town called Reading, which was about 40 miles west of London. My mother was a great homemaker, particularly through my early days through middle school. She was a stay-at-home mom, and I was very fortunate. My father had a job that was great after the war. And so we did the usual things, school, played in the park, went home for meals. My grandmother lived around the corner, so that was very impactful in my life as well. But my father was a very active person. He was ambitious to improve his family's security and income after the war. And so he elected to take a chance in opening his own business. And he was a carpenter and builder. So he converted two houses into retail stores. Never been to retail before in his life. My mother, never been in retail or ever had a business. So I don't think she'd actually ever had a job at that time. But she was a very engaged partner. We lived above the business in a small flat, and we were open from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. So she was very busy, and she took and became the kind of backbone of the administration of the business, which was amazing. She pivoted from stay-at-home mom into a business partner. And at the same time, she didn't let go of her duties in looking after her two children. The final parts of our life, we grew up to my mother and father sold the businesses, and then they moved into a kind of retirement. By that time, we'd moved off to Canada at the first trip. So I guess I took on my father's ambitions to move and improve myself and took my family to Canada. So I admired her for her ability to pivot and to learn new skills, which were very transformative for the family. She was an extremely hard worker. Turns out she was very good at math. And I always recall her sitting in the back room where our little kitchenette was, counting out the money at the end of the day's business and then putting it in the bank. So that was, important influence on my life, that experience with my mother and father in transforming from home life plus business.
I'm loving this visual image that I have now of the retail store, your mom in the kitchen. What were some of the things that they sold in the store?
Well, the first store she had was confectionery, which is candy. She had a dry cleaning outlet. The store was located on a transportation route, so a lot of people will come in, particularly after work, if they had birthdays or celebrations, they would come in for boxes of chocolates and candy for the kids, and all the kids would come in on Saturday and Sunday with their parents to buy their weekly supply of candy. And then the second store was the baby apparel. She opened up baby's clothing, equipment in the store next door. So finally, I persuaded them that she could make just as much money renting out the premises as they could by running the business. So she was getting a little tired at that time, and we pivoted yet again as they leased the properties out and were able to retire on the rental income. So it was a great advancement for them, and I think that was a great experience. And then they had the time to come and visit with us in Canada, which I think one of the best memories I have of how I could contribute back to my parents who had never, ever traveled abroad was the times we spent together when we invited them to Canada to be with us and the children. That was really the highlight of their retirement, I think, was spending time with us in the city of Montreal. And then we had a small house in the countryside, which had a little lake in it. And my father would just love going out in the mornings into the woods and down to the lake and just being around that, beautiful sort of Canadian winters and summers. That was a very special time.
I've heard so much about the Canada house and the pond, and I got to benefit from your parents visiting and getting to meet them when I first started dating Chris. So I'm just appreciating all these extra details that I get to now layer upon my own experience and all the things that I've heard. It seems clear to me from what I know of you, how much you have always wanted to chart new territory and pivot and try new things, and the entrepreneurial spirit that I experience in you all the time. It seems like you definitely got some of this from both of your parents. How do you think that their example led you to your life path? And what do you think that you've been most on a quest for in your life?
That's a very good question. Some question I've always asked myself. But in looking back, I was looking for independence. When I left school, I didn't go to college. Neither Annie and I went to college when we left school in England. We would undertake 2 years of pre-college at school. And then the college courses or university courses were 2 years in the UK. But places were very far during the early, I guess, 60s. So I went to work and I found that in an environment of structure and institutions, it was a slow process. So I wanted to get out and make further progress on my own, a faster pace. So that's when I elected to try my hand at moving abroad, starting again and try my hand in a new environment. And that took us to Canada as a first stop.
And then you did that all over again years later, right?
We did that all over again back here. We were 10 years in Canada, and it was a very successful 10 years, though, even despite the fact that the climate there is not conducive to, pleasant winters necessarily, but they were different winters. We learned to ski and we had some lovely times in the countryside. But in the late 70s, there was a political upheaval between the British-speaking or the English-speaking connections in Canada and the French-speaking province of Quebec, to such an extent that we experienced a particular episode when there were mailbox bombings. We had to have army was in the streets. There was a lot of disruption, which affected the businesses. And in the end of the day, the separatist leading local community, Quebec is this French-speaking province, and there's always been some conflict, or maybe not the right word, some tension between the English-speaking part of Canada and the French-speaking, which finally led to political change at the top, where the Prime Minister of Quebec promised the population that he would have a referendum. And the mere fact that he offered a referendum, I think, was enough to really transform business. A lot of businesses moved out. And my business at the time, although it was doing well, suffered as a result, to the point where we felt that the problem of separation was such that it would take more than any time that I had to resolve it. So we figured it was time we moved on. And it's funnily enough, even though we were Canadians, the travel between east and west of Canada was quite expensive. So typically most people living on the east side of Canada traveled north-south. And so we were much more familiar with what was going on in the United States necessarily than what was going on in the Western Canada. And I had a partner at that time who was another Brit and had been to Harvard. His suggestion was we try to make a move into the United States, into Massachusetts, funnily enough, in and around Harvard. And we spent some time trying to look at opportunities there, and nothing really actually came up. We got kind of really disappointed at one particular time. It was really February, dark February, rainy, snowy night. And my partner said, well, let's take a break. Have you ever been to California? I said, no. He said, okay, let's go out there and take a look. He said, I have some friends out there and we need a break. So we took the red-eye special from Boston out to Los Angeles. And as you can imagine, the plane landed, the door opened, blue skies, palm trees, and I was sold. And so we then spent the next 6 months pursuing opportunities in Los Angeles area, and finally ended up in San Jose, California, through some advice from my partner's connections in Los Angeles. And that's kind of the beginning of the San Jose story, and it's been that way for over 40 years.
I love hearing this. It's reminding me so much of my own father's story about how he ended up in California. And, my dad always believes in pursuing your fate. And I think you are a person who has pursued your fate too. And it's so interesting.
I always loved your father's story.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about, had something slightly changed, Chris might have gone to some school in, back east and not UCLA, and we wouldn't have met. I love knowing all the little steps that brought us to one another and to being in one another's family.
In fact, we're just going back a little. Of course, when we left England, we had a child of 9 months. That was Emma. Chris was born in Canada, and then they were further educated when we came to California.
So we're going to now delve into what I call the EPIC guideposts. EPIC, as you know, has been this metaphor for the kind of life I want to live, especially while raising my children, where I say yes to the things that really matter and don't let fear get in my way. And then it's also an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that kind of life while we're raising our kids. So I would love to hear your words of wisdom. You have lived such a rich and epic life. And I want to hear some of the reflections and things that you've learned in your own journey across these guideposts. So we're going to start with E, which stands for engaged mindfully with our children, and in your case, also grandchildren. What are some of the things that you have learned along the way about how to connect with your children and grandchildren, which I observe you to do so beautifully?
Well, I have to say on this point, I guess it's reflective insofar as my relationship with my own children's always been very good. However, when I was building the business, I didn't necessarily spend as much time with them as I should have done or as I could have done. I always remember Chris and I walking down the stairs of the house, and he looked up and said to me, "Dad, you don't come to my soccer practices anymore."
Mm.
And I really looked at myself and thought, wow, that's something I really need to think about. And it was a slow process, but it was something that was always on my mind. So I think reflectively supporting the family, and particularly now the grandchildren, so that I now have a little more time to do that, not necessarily replace the time I didn't spend with my kids. I think if you ask them, yes, they probably can reflect on that, but I think I'm pretty proud to say that I don't think any long-term disregard has resulted from that. So I don't feel any total regret, but I certainly have a pinch of conscience. So looking and spending time with my grandchildren. Now, obviously, a grandfather, I have a little bit more time. And I love seeing them grow, as I love seeing young people grow, both in the business, but particularly, of course, seeing our grandchildren grow. And they have a pathway to full personal and professional life ahead of them. I'm not necessarily quite so much concerned about their academic accomplishments and successes, which I'm confident they're going to do very successfully, but life skills, the things like the practical things of life skills that I went through, overcoming disappointment and failures, knowing that life is going to be like that. So it's not a straight line. And there are lots of ups and downs, influences in their life, and learning that it's okay. It's okay for it not to work one day. Things will always get better. Life's journey is long, and I think learning to deal with those issues and help them, I wouldn't say get used to it, but also to have a process of which they can handle things that don't quite go the way they want them in life is helpful. So I love mentoring them. I love hearing their visions, and I think they're all hardworking kids, and I'm very, very proud of them.
We're going to have opportunity for the acknowledgments at the end of the episode, but I feel like I already need to share some acknowledgments I have of you related to how I see you engage with your grandchildren. So a few things I really appreciate. One, we were just at your house for dinner, and Eva, my niece, your granddaughter, had just come from studying abroad, and she's getting ready to do an internship. So the evening was kind of in honor of her, but you decided at dinner to give a toast to each of your grandchildren. And you took time to fully acknowledge each of them for what you see in them in this moment in their life and what they're experiencing. And I think that gift of truly seeing your grandchildren, and I know your children feel seen by you as well, and acknowledged is something really special and something I see you do all the time.
Well, thank you for that, Julie. I really appreciate that. I can't be measured in certain areas that they work in or they live in. It's hard for an 80-year-old to be where they are in their social experiences. But I think there's some basic things in life that I've learned that will help them, whether they do it or whether they think. I know they think about it, right? And I mean, I remember taking the kids to summer camp for golf, for example. And the fact that they don't play golf now, they know that they have that skill, but it won't take them too long to get, they could take that up again. So it's having something that lasts with them that they can reuse later on in different circumstances during their life, I think is important.
Yeah. And that golf was just one of many things that they used to do at what we affectionately called Papa Camp.
Papa Camp.
I'm certain what they'll remember the most from Papa Camp, yes, they'll be able to pick up a golf club with some confidence in the future, but I think they'll remember that you did take the time, that you really cared about spending time with them and creating memories and connections between them. Those were really special. And of course, Anne was equally a part of those experiences.
Exactly.
There's another thing I want to acknowledge you for here, and I know we're going to get into it more later. That will be our transition into our next guidepost. But, you have two extremely neurotypical, beautiful granddaughters. And then you got blessed with two very neurodivergent grandsons.
That's certainly true.
Ryan is autistic and has ADHD and is also highly gifted. And Jacob, as you know, has ADHD and dyslexia and dysgraphia. And one of the things that I feel like you and I have been on a journey together through, well, certainly I've been learning as well, but I feel like you've had a really big learning curve in terms of your own understanding and awareness about the ways in which they're different, but also how you can embrace them for who they are and how you can support them. And a couple times, I think you and I have even had some really honest, sometimes challenging conversations. But I have found you to be so incredibly open and interested in learning, really meeting them each where they are. And I know they appreciate it. And I'm teary thinking about it, but it's really a gift and it's so generous of you. I've really appreciated this about you. So, end of episode acknowledgements already starting now.
Julie, it's very kind of you to say that. And I must add that you have been a great mentor to me and to Annie through this pivoting of relationships and understanding and learning. You know, the old school is very easy to be tough love and just got to suck it out and make sure that you keep at it and it'll all work out. But I now understand that that doesn't happen, right? These things are much more complicated and need a lot more thought about how you engage with these disabilities. And I'm not saying we've been totally successful all the time, but I think I definitely have a better understanding and certainly want to try to be the best grandparents we can be, not only in helping, but understanding this is not just specific to them, but it is an issue that we're all facing with some of our young folks and even adults. So I'm very committed to trying to help wherever I can. And I want to understand. If we could walk in their shoes, I think it would be very helpful. But as we can't do that practically, we can do that through conversations with them and certainly learning from somebody like yourself who has spent a lot more time and is much more knowledgeable of the understanding of neurodiversity. Yeah, I was very happy to start the fund that we're working on together, and that's very exciting. Sorry, I missed the last meeting. That was a little absenteeism on behalf of Deanna, but I mean, that's the good thing that hopefully is going to be something that can continue where I'm not able to participate in it as actively as I'm able to right now. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. So I want to move to the next guidepost P, which stands for passionate and purposeful impact. And I definitely want to hear you share a little bit about the broad impact that you've had in the world, because it's immense. But I want to also start with just carrying the thread of this topic of neurodiversity with the fund that you helped to start in honor of your 80th birthday. Can you share a little bit about what that is and what your inspiration was and what your hopes are through this fund?
Well, my inspiration comes from working with my grandchildren, right? And learning and understanding that this is something that is beyond necessarily their personal experiences and challenges. So what could I do? I really can't go personally. I'm not a therapist. I'm not technically conversant with everything in this area, but I felt I could engage other people, right? So if I could get other people together, and I experienced this through a friend of mine who started a fund in the art world for young people learning and progressing in art. And he started a fund and was able to help young people in their careers. And I thought, well, that was a great example in art. How can I do the same thing? And I'm a member of the Rotary Club, which is very active and has an endowment and has a membership of, I think, nearly 300 people, very diverse members. And it has so happened that a number of them had experiences in this area. So starting the fund was a way that I could, start the process going. It was a catalyst to whatever we were trying to do. And around that, meeting the sorts of people that could facilitate the fund and gather the interests of other folks who had interest in neurodiversity. And that really is what happened. So the fund is really just a catalyst. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's a start. And I think it's engaging people, engaging my grandson directly, that he is actually willing to take time out of his academic career to spend on the committee with us. And we have 3 or 4 very dedicated people who are very committed to this field. And I think we want to help more youth the diversity of youth struggling to find with the challenges of getting through their academic life, they're dealing with their social life, and so that they can have some help as they grow into their future professional lives.
I've been so inspired to be on this committee and to be part of this process. And what a blessing to be able to do it alongside my father-in-law and my son. So I'm going to just share a few details and then mention that there'll be links to the fund in case anybody who's listening decides they would like to contribute. And then come next fall, which will be fall 2023, we'll also have a call for applications. So what we've determined through our collaborative work together so far is that we want to focus on young people and that advocacy really matters and empowerment matters. So the working name at the moment is the Youth Neurodiversity Empowerment Fund. And this first round, we're working on crafting grants to young people, probably older young people, like between maybe 18 and 22 or 24, for them to use creative expression to help share what their experience is navigating the world of neurodiversity in the neurotypical world and helping us to understand them better and to share what it is that they need to more fully thrive. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that unfolds. And I know it's just the beginning of our process, but I have a feeling it's going to grow in amazing ways.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Julie. You explained that well. Anecdotally, I spent, I think, 17 years on the board of an education foundation in San Jose. And so I learned a lot about public education and the issues facing children, not in necessarily their academics, but in the social health areas. And so that was some influence on me in terms of acknowledging that there's lots of work to be done out there.
Absolutely. In terms of your impact in the world, I think the very active role that you've played on the board that you just mentioned in seeding and being part of creating this new fund. But I've also observed what an incredible legacy you've built in terms of housing, particularly in San Jose and some of the surrounding communities. Can you share a little bit about looking back now on your career? What impact do you think you really had big picture through the development work that you've done?
Well, I've always been interested in building physically and also building in terms of community engagement. And when I came to San Jose, I was very interested in resolving the issues of redevelopment. How do you rebuild a city? How do you rebuild neighborhoods and commitments? When I came here in San Jose back in the 70s, the downtown area being completely demolished, there was a feeling that you ought to tear down in order you could rebuild. In my career up in Montreal, we had done a lot of rehabilitation. So we kept existing buildings instead of knocking them down and revitalized them for reuse. And so that was my primary interest. When I got to San Jose, we became involved more in community housing and the need for more affordable housing. And the political commitment was there. There was financing available from many public resources. And I wouldn't say we kind of fell into it, but it was a guideline and a roadway and a pathway that I felt comfortable in pursuing. And so we've been a leader in terms of locally, certainly. I think we're well known in San Jose area and Santa Clara County for our efforts in affordable housing. And I have to say, and give a lot of credit to my son, Chris, your husband, who has clearly adopted the same passion. And we've grown the company over the last 20 years together. And I would think, honestly, Chris is probably known as the expert affordable housing finance guy in the San Jose area. So I'm very happy with the impact we made. It's a challenge, that's for sure. And the issues have got greater than smaller. As many houses that we build, there are more folks who are in need. So it's a challenging job.
I love to talk about this idea of epic snapshot moments. And these are, sometimes you actually capture the moment with the photo, or sometimes it's just a moment where you notice that life seems to slow down and you feel like you're experiencing something that you've always wanted and you want to bottle it up and remember it. Do you have an epic snapshot moment from the work that you've done building and creating communities that stands out for you?
Yes, I do. One of our projects we were asked to do was to help a group of folks who wanted to build their own home. There was a program that allowed what they call self-help, and they were not able to find a location, and I was able to find a location for them. It was like 12 houses. There were 12 families, and everybody had to put in 40 hours a week to build a house. They got special assistance from City of San Jose. But my epic journey with them was to take them on a bus to the site, and got out the bus and they all followed, and we're walking down the street. And as we got to the site, which was on the east side of San Jose, one of the older relationships with one of the families came running up to me and he said, David, you're like Moses. You're leading us to the promised land. And I thought, wow, all things are meaningful in different ways to different people. But that was a moment when I felt, wow, we really had done something for these folks. And it all worked well. And we got 12 families occupied in their houses. And the amazing thing, it was the women, the mothers, who actually spent the most time. I mean, the guys were out there, the fathers had to go to work as well. But it was the mothers who were out there every day, hammering a nail, cleaning something, carrying, putting a pipe in, and also on the phone all the time to their husbands, fathers, making sure that they came home and came straight down to the building site to help them out. So that was a mother's quest on its own.
Yes, that's amazing. I'm not surprised, but I love hearing about that. I've had the gift of being alongside Chris, who has loved working with you, and to know just a little bit about some of the projects that you've created. But I feel like, creating housing for veterans, creating the agrihood where there's an urban farm in the middle of housing. Like, I feel like that you have really innovated and really put communities at the center in a lot of what you've created. And that's so powerful.
I appreciate that. We like to think of ourselves as thinking outside the box. We're dealing with a lot of institutions who have a straight line in the way they work and operate and find it difficult to find new ways. So thinking outside the box has enabled us to bring different solutions. And that's been a very satisfying part of my career. One particular example is artists. There's an area in the San Jose which was an artist, I wouldn't say a colony, but it was occupied by many young artists, old industrial areas south of San Jose. Some of the buildings would get knocked down or demolished. There was nowhere for them to go. And the local council member was very anxious to make sure that there was some ability for them to preserve the places that they could still pursue their art careers. And so we came up with the idea of a housing project for artists. And that was to thread the needle through the different financing requirements to allow only artists to live in the premises was very difficult. But anyway, we did it. We called the project the Art Arc. And we ended up with about over 20% of the tenants were artists. And then remaining occupants were people who loved to be around art. They just loved being with artists. And we built that art gallery for them, separated in the common area. That art gallery has now become part of the art walk in downtown San Jose through the work of the artists living in the Art Arc. And furthermore, we allow them to decorate the common area hallways in the garage with street art, which I love street art, which they did to such an extent that the street art images now cannot be repainted over. They're so good that they're being preserved. That was an interesting out-of-the-box solution for a particular housing need.
Such an amazing story. And I know that these are just a few, and there's so much that you've done. How many people do you think you have created homes for in the San Jose area over these years?
3,000 units. Well, 80,000 people probably altogether. If you take, family of four on average, I guess. Maybe a little over exaggerating, but not far off.
That's incredible. Occasionally, when I think about the work you and Chris do, I think about the fact that you're like constructing the walls that these people are living in. But then I imagine like even just one of the families and like what may be happening inside those walls for those families, for their children, for the art they're creating inside the walls or the businesses they're dreaming up. And the fact that they are able to be housed in this area, which is so challenging, and housed in ways that are thoughtful and outside the box and beautiful. And it's really an incredible impact that you've had.
I think the other thing we learned is that housing is not just a building, right? Housing is a place to stay, but there are a lot of challenges for people who are trying to stay in the house once they're in there. And I think we really understand that a lot of services are required. And so we try to provide those services in the community areas we've spent in some of the family projects. We end up being the childcare provider. Well, the mother and the father are away working, and the work hours don't coincide with school hours, for example. So we've spent a lot of time. We've had folks who have joined the community who can help provide services. I think we always have that in mind. It's not just the kitchen and the bathroom and the roof, which is, of course, very important, but it's also helping them to survive in the house and to stay there.
Well, we're now at the next guidepost I, which stands for invested in yourself. And this is about all the things that you do to take care of yourself, to help you to personally learn and grow, and to bring things in your life that bring you joy. What would you say are a few lessons you've learned about how to invest in yourself?
Good question. Time is very valuable as you get older. So I think creating time to be able to spend time with, I still love spending time with my family. And if we're talking about going on vacation, I always think, well, can we go somewhere where all the family can come? We created this home in Mexico, which is a vacation home. Part of the pleasure of having that is having all the family join. So maintaining that connection with the family is extremely important. I love my business. I love the people that work in the business. I love seeing them grow. I'm trying not to overshadow everybody. I'm trying to let them grow organically with their own teams. I'm hoping that's happening. I've really loved all my partners I've had in my career. I've stayed very close to them. And of course, my wife and our personal time is very important. We love traveling. So we're going to spend a little bit more time doing that.
So you just turned 80.
Mm-hmm.
You don't seem, preconceptions aside about what it means to age, like you have such a young spirit and you look like a young person and you're out there like paddleboarding and golfing and you're so active. What do you think has been the key to your longevity and your having this youthful spirit?
That's a good question. I think sort of staying positive, not letting issues get you down, understanding that there are certain things in life that will drop and have to be made necessarily to change your life, but have to deal with those issues in a rational way and not let them get you down. So try to avoid anxiety. And then just if things don't go quite well, we just get up and keep going and keep walking. Don't let them get you down. There's always the shining light on the hill. There's always one for me. In whatever I do, I'm always looking for that shining light on the hill. That keeps me active as long as I can stay healthy and pursue that. I'm going to try to continue.
Well, we've now arrived at the last guidepost C, which stands for connected to a strong support network. You already mentioned your relationship with Anne, my mother-in-law. How many years have you been married? And I'm wondering what you feel like has been some of the keys to the success of your incredibly amazing partnership with your wife.
Well, the exact number, I'm going to fail that one, I think. But I think it must be close to 60, I guess, now. I'm sure.
Wow.
I think Annie has been an unbelievable partner insofar as particularly in supporting my dreams and ambitions, 100%. And we've been through lots of things together. We've had successes in our businesses and we've had failures, but never letting us get us down and never questioning the result. We knew that together we could overcome most difficult patches we had in our life together. So I have to thank her for that. She's a wonderful mother, a wonderful grandmother, a wonderful partner. We enjoy spending time with each other, which is great. We still laugh and cuddle. So I think Annie's support has been the biggest thing, the ambitions I have and where we are today.
Do you feel like there are any other key lessons you've learned in terms of the relationships that you've built in your life, your community connections and friendships?
I think honesty and integrity is probably the biggest thing. I think without integrity, whatever you do has less value. And so it's part of our vision of success for our company is integrity is number one. And I think we've been able to drive that down to the team members. And we give examples of integrity throughout the company on a weekly basis. So I think that's one of the key items. I think if you ask anybody about CORE and about me and about Chris, we work with great integrity in the community. And we're believable, we're honest, and we're reliable.
So we're almost at the end of this conversation, and this is an opportunity for you to invite me and anyone listening to say yes to some kind of a challenge or an invitation that you would have for us that you think could help us more fully live our epic lives.
Well, that's a challenge. I think believing and understanding that life is not a straight line, right? One has to learn to adapt and pivot to new circumstances all the time. It may happen daily. There are many things that would be easy just to have to give up or have to readjust. But I think that believing that you can accomplish what your goals are is important. So the quick answer is never give up on anything you really want to do. Try to do things that you love to do, because if you love doing something, you'll be successful. And I think that's why I've always loved what I've done. And that's one of the other critical areas I think that's important. You have to love what you do. Never stop asking questions. We all have to learn. We're all continually learning. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. I think that inquisitiveness is important. I know I have one grandson who's particularly inquisitive, so that's a good sign.
I'm feeling compelled because we haven't talked about it yet. But I think, this invitation to realize life's not a straight line. There'll be failures along the way, but not to give up on the things that you are most seeking in your life. I would love to hear some of the list of failures that happened along the way in your epic life journey. Because sometimes when I heard about all of the different things that you guys tried and opened and closed, I think it's amazing and inspirational to know that, you tried that thing and that one didn't work. Oh, wow, that one didn't work either. But then look at where you arrived with so much incredible success and such an impact. So what are some of the things that you had to pivot away from on your epic life journey?
Well, I think the ones that first come to mind are mostly related to the business. We were successful in Canada to the point that we thought that we had a stable career, only to find this political incursion destroyed everything. So that was one thing gone. So we had to pivot again. So that's when we moved to the United States. We arrived in San Jose eventually. My first development, interest rates rose from a typical 5% mortgage rate to 18%, which is what people don't understand, that there have been large financial impacts on housing. So I had to pivot from that one. And then I had another period of time when my partners left me. I had two partners, both were Brits. One left to go back into the high-tech business. He was ex-IBM engineer. And the other one went back to the UK. So I ended up being completely on my own without any business whatsoever, with a wife and family to continue. And I had to find a way to make a living. So I connected with a group of doctors who had a particular piece of real estate that they needed to sell. And I was able to help them out, and they paid me a consultancy fee, pay for the work I did, and which was enough for me to get me through to the next time. And then through several other financial crises in the United States, we ended up going into the antique business. We then went into the English pub business. So I definitely have pivoted in many, many ways. But I always believed that in the end, I would find something that was going to work. And I didn't necessarily know which one. I did get a lot of advice and support from my partners, from Annie, through all this. I mean, a lot of people could have just thrown it all in the air and just given up. I knew I had to succeed. And with a lot of help from a lot of people, we were able to overcome those financial difficulties. On a personal level, I guess, if anything, if I look back, and I don't know how this would have made a difference in my life, but had I taken the time to make a little more effort to take those extra 2 years and go to University of England, would it have made any difference? I always feel that maybe I should have done that. I think Annie also feels the same thing, because we ended up on the same pathway together. But there again, we may not have met. So who knows what that future would have been. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it, but it does cross my mind every now and again.
So in terms of a challenge for listeners, I'm feeling like there could be a lot of benefit for us to look back on the path of our lives and to notice the places where we've pivoted or where we've had things that felt like failures, and then to notice the places where we believed in ourselves and had success, and then use those experiences and moments to keep fueling us to move forward and to keep creating these epic snapshot moments and showing up for our kids and in the impact that we're here to make on others, and that we keep investing in ourselves. So I think I'm going to go through that process and look back on my life. And I thank you for sharing all the details of your twists and turns that have helped you to arrive to where you are now.
Julie, you're a very good interviewer. You have a lovely way with words. And I think you put that so nicely. Thank you.
Well, we're at the end of this conversation. I get the joy of having many more with you in the future. But For us to close this, would love to end with acknowledgments. This is an opportunity for us to share anything in particular that we're appreciating or taking away from this conversation. Sounds like you've already started the acknowledgments. Thank you for that compliment about how I hold space for interviews. Is there anything else that you want to share, either that you feel like you have realized or you're taking away from this conversation, or that you appreciated about this format?
Well, I think the most important thing is the ability to actually sit down for an hour and talk about things, right? We don't often do. And I think you have a format which makes that very easy and comfortable. And I'm hoping that I have been able to help some of your listeners with the stories about my life that may help them in some way. So I really appreciate, I've always enjoyed the fact that you started this business, Julie. I supported you in the very beginning. I'm so happy to see how it's grown. I wish you lots and lots more success.
Thank you. Well, I want to acknowledge you, David, for being open to this conversation, which I think is just a metaphor for the openness that I experience of you in so many areas of your life. Open to your career path, taking twists and turns, but believing it would take you somewhere that would be meaningful, open to your grandchildren and to truly seeing them and wanting to connect and really help them to flourish and grow on their own unique paths, open to your partnerships and your relationships with Anne and with Chris. I love your entrepreneurial spirit and the ways that that has manifested through so many creative projects. I loved hearing about some of them today, and your ability to think outside the box. So I think I'm leaving this conversation inspired to look back on my own path and notice the things that have worked and the things that haven't, but to notice some common threads, and then to stay committed to my own pursuit and to believe that it's possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, visit mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and help us to spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.